heartbroken, sorrowful, and deeply reflective. Those are my feelings after researching and learning about more than 100 famous Black figures connected to the tragic final days behind the brilliant spotlight. And here is the video: 19 Black celebrities who died looking their worst. It might leave you stunned. This video is perfectly suited to play while resting, enjoying a meal with your family, and doing housework. Please follow the channel, hit the like button, and turn on the notification bell to receive our earliest videos. Now let us go straight to our first figures. Michael Jackson. Michael Jackson, the great name that reshaped the entire world music and dance industry. With the title King of Pop, Michael once possessed a radiant beauty, a gentle smile, and a supple body that captivated hundreds of millions of fans across continents. However, when the velvet curtains closed, his real life was a long series of days battling loneliness and the most cruel pressures a human being could bear. When he passed away in 2009, the world was not only stunned by his sudden departure, but also heartbroken to learn that such a great figure had become incredibly frail. From an analytical perspective, Michael Jackson's physical depletion in his final years is a sorrowful indictment of the harshness of the entertainment world. A series of baseless lawsuits, the cruel scrutiny of the media, and massive financial burdens pushed him into chronic insomnia. To be able to fall asleep and continue shouldering the grueling rehearsal schedule for the This Is It tour, he had to wager his life on high-dose sedatives. His physical condition declined severely. His gaunt figure and a face etched with ultimate fatigue were proof of a soul that had been completely drained. We look at Michael Jackson's final days with profound empathy. His no longer retaining the flawless exterior of his 20s was not a blameworthy deterioration, but the cruel bill that fame forced him to pay. Behind the masks and outfits covering that frail body was a father yearning to sing, to dedicate himself to protecting his children. Michael Jackson flew to eternity, leaving behind a noisy world to finally find for himself a completely peaceful sleep. Whitney Houston. Whitney Houston was once the most perfect definition of the concept diva. Her gorgeous beauty, haughty demeanor, and a soaring, crystal-clear voice helped her conquer every peak of fame. During the glorious years of the 90s, Whitney was the symbol of brilliance and success. However, following the flow of time, that brilliant light was gradually obscured by the dark clouds of personal tragedy. When she passed away, sorrowfully in a hotel room in Beverly Hills, the public could not help but choke up, realizing that the haughty beauty and radiant smile of the past of the golden voice had completely faded. Analyzing deeper into Whitney's life, we realize the fading of her physical appearance was the consequence of a heart carrying too many wounds. In contrast to her strong exterior on stage, Whitney's inner self was incredibly fragile and always yearned for a solid emotional anchor. The deadlock in a tear-filled marriage and the heavy pressures of always having to maintain the image of a good girl in the eyes of the public pushed her down the wrong path. Her reliance on chemical substances to escape reality ravaged not only her precious vocal cords, but also wore away her vitality, turning a beauty queen into a woman with a melancholic, frail expression. On our channel, the story of Whitney Houston always leaves a quiet space full of regret. Her breakdown in her final years is a painful testament, showing that stage aura cannot be the healing medicine for cracks in the soul. Her losing her peak form does not diminish her greatness, but only makes us feel more sorrow for a multi-talented but ill-fated woman. Even though Whitney's final days were overshadowed by weariness, her musical legacy and the moments she shone most brilliantly will always be a precious gem in world music history. Every aura comes with tears. Please do not skip ahead, because the third figure coming right up, a great visually impaired legend, will leave you in deep reflection. Remember to give the channel a like if you feel this empathy. Ray Charles. Ray Charles was a miracle of American music. Losing his sight since he was a young boy, Ray used his hands and ears to paint a vibrantly colorful world through piano keys. His blending of gospel blues and jazz created the highly revolutionary soul genre. On stage, Ray always appeared with his familiar dark glasses, a wide smile, and energetic sways. He inspired millions of people about an extraordinary will to live. However, in the final stage of his journey, that talented blind musician had to go through incredibly harsh days as his body was gradually drained by a severe illness. Unlike artists ravaged by public pressure, the change in Ray Charles's appearance in his final years was the inevitable consequence of the rules of birth, aging, illness, and death, yet it carried a highly epic hue. Chronic liver failure silently stripped away the strength of a man who once never knew fatigue at the piano. His body became gaunt, debilitated, and his steps were no longer steady. But what makes people admire him the most is his iron will. Even as his body was gradually withering from pain, Ray resolutely refused to leave music, continuing to record until he no longer had enough strength to sit up. Reflecting on the departure of Ray Charles, we see the great contrast between a fragile physical body and an immortal spirit. His frailty before passing away was the final bill he had to pay for a life that squeezed out every essence for art. Ray walked through a life submerged in physical darkness, but brought light to millions of other souls. His quiet departure at the age of 73 was a well-deserved sleep for a warrior who had excellently completed his mission on this earth. Jimi Hendrix. In the golden era of 60s, rock and roll, no image was more iconic and brilliant than Jimi Hendrix. He was a true wizard, someone who could create surreal sounds from the electric guitar. Jimi's beauty and style back then were deeply imbued with wildness, freedom, and explosive energy. He was the voice of a generation yearning to break traditional barriers. However, behind the fiery performances to the point of burning his guitar on stage, Jimi was a young man being gradually incinerated by the music industry machine itself. His sudden end at the age of 27 left a highly painful image of the exhaustion of a genius. An analytical perspective shows that Jimi Hendrix's frailty was not simply the consequence of all-night revelries. The nature of the tragedy lay in the cruel draining of labor or burnout. A suffocatingly dense touring schedule, binding recording contracts, and legal troubles pushed his nervous system to the absolute limit. Jimi was always in a state of severe sleep deprivation and ultimate tension. His image in his final days, tired, haggard, with glassy eyes lacking the proud fire of the past, is the clearest proof of a soul yearning for rest. His having to resort to sedatives to seek a brief sleep was the consequence of an inescapable deadlock. The story of Jimi Hendrix is a profound wake-up call about how outstanding talents are often easily suffocated. The fact that the public only sees the most brilliant moments while ignoring the withering behind the scenes is a cruelty of fame. Jimi dedicated his entire vitality in exchange for musical notes that changed history. Even though he had to leave in a frail and weary form, the fire of passion he lit will never ever extinguish in the hearts of music lovers. Marvin Gaye. Marvin Gaye is honored as the Prince of Soul, a singer-songwriter carrying a sensitive heart and a vision ahead of his time. Through immortal songs like What's Going On, Marvin draped the soul genre in a new cloak full of philosophy, humanity, and ponderings about the times. Possessing a handsome, elegant appearance and a voice as smooth as velvet, he easily captured the hearts of millions of audiences. However, the most heartbreaking paradox in Marvin's life was this: a person who spent his whole life raising songs to soothe the pain of humanity could not heal himself. The transformation in Marvin Gaye's appearance and aura in his final years was the result of a prolonged psychological breakdown process. Deep conflicts and never-ending arguments with his own biological father created an unhealable emotional wound. The pressure of a major star resonating with the burden of debt due to failed investment ventures and cracks in his marriage pushed him into severe paranoia and depression. The Marvin of those days locked himself in his room, exhausted, frail, and had to rely on stimulants as a way to run away from a suffocating reality. The elegant aura of the past was replaced by defensiveness and deep sorrow. On our channel, the end of Marvin Gaye is one of the stories leaving the most melancholy. He passed away in a depleted body not from a natural illness, but from the deadlock of family ties. It sounds a wake-up bell that traumas from family have a more horrific destructive power than any social pressure. However, rising above the frail image in his final days, we forever engrave the silhouette of a brilliant Marvin Gaye who bravely used music to embrace the pains of an entire generation. The 5 stories we just heard are truly so very melancholy. Please stay with us and press subscribe to the channel because tragedy number 6, coming right up, will reveal the heartbreaking truth behind the gorgeous smile of a jazz monument. Nat King Cole. Nat King Cole is a great symbol of elegance. Possessing a deep male voice as smooth as velvet, he turned songs like Unforgettable or Mona Lisa into immortal standards of American music. Not only a jazz legend, Nat was also the first black artist to have his own television show, proudly breaking the invisible barriers of racial discrimination at the time. Always appearing with a calm smile, a crisp suit, and an aristocratic demeanor, he was the embodiment of a flawless American dream. However, behind that calmness and ever-present smile was a massive pressure weighing on the shoulders of a pioneer. From an analytical perspective, the physical depletion of Nat King Cole at the age of 45 is one of the tragedies leaving the most regret. To cope with the ultimate stress of standing in the crosshairs of public opinion, having to maintain a perfect image before a society still holding many prejudices, he turned to cigarette smoke as his only sedative therapy. This trade-off brought a cruel sentence. Lung cancer progressed at a terrifying speed. In his final months at a hospital in Santa Monica, his once robust and dashing body was drained to exhaustion by cancer cells. A gaunt figure, heart-wrenching coughs, and the inability to raise his singing voice stripped away the vitality of a legend. At our memory vault, we view the departure of Nat King Cole not as a terrifying fading, but as the sacrifice of a candle that burned itself out to light the way for the next generation. Audiences felt heartbroken seeing his emaciated image on the hospital bed because they understood he had shouldered far too many expectations of an entire community. Although his physical body was worn down by severe illness and invisible pressures, his dignity and elegance remained intact until his final breath. Nat King Cole left too soon, but his smooth voice will forever be a warm blanket, comforting music-loving souls across many generations. Sammy Davis Jr. If there was a person born to belong to the stage lights, that person was definitely Sammy Davis Jr. As part of the illustrious Rat Pack, Sammy was a rare all-around artist. He could sing dance with masterful tap dance, steps play instruments, and act with a seemingly endless source of energy. On the brilliant stages in Las Vegas, Sammy's radiant smile and charm could light up any space. However, deep inside the soul of this entertainment master was a boundless insecurity. The intense desire to be recognized by the public, to overcome prejudices about skin color, pushed him into a lifestyle that squeezed himself dry. The physical and financial decline of Sammy Davis Jr. in his final years is a costly lesson about the dark side of fame. When throat cancer struck, it took away not only his health, but also his most precious weapon, his singing voice. Having to go through harsh chemotherapy sessions, Sammy's inherently small and supple body became frail and weak. But even more bitter than the illness was the loneliness amidst the siege of debt. Once spending money lavishly to maintain an extravagant lifestyle and buy the attention of those around him, he departed in an empty house, leaving behind millions of dollars in tax debt. His weary eyes in his final days were the eyes of someone who had dedicated everything in exchange for applause, but ultimately realized the heartlessness of camera flashes. Mentioning Sammy Davis Jr., we feel a deep sense of gratitude mixed with melancholy. The unrecognizability on his face in his final days is exactly the mark of a life dedicated to the point of exhaustion. He used his singing voice and dance steps to soothe the boundaries of a segregated society, but could not keep a peaceful old age for himself. Sammy taught us a heartbreaking truth. Sometimes the people who always try to make the whole world happy are the ones carrying the greatest fear of loneliness in their hearts. Billie Holiday. Billie Holiday, also affectionately known as Lady Day, is one of the greatest and most sorrowful jazz voices of the 20th century. Always appearing with a pure white gardenia pinned in her hair, Billie carried a melancholic, aristocratic beauty. When she raised the haunting melodies of the song Strange Fruit, the whole world seemed to bow before the soul-piercing pain of black people. However, behind that magical singing voice is an autobiography written with bleeding wounds, an abused childhood, abusive romances, and a society filled with discrimination pushed Billie into a dead end. Her turning to addictive substances was a highly desperate defense mechanism to numb the unhealable pains. The end of Billie Holiday at a hospital in New York in 1959 is one of the darkest and most aching pages in American judicial history. She did not just die due to the devastation of cirrhosis or heart failure resulting from months and days of drug abuse. She died because of the cruelty and apathy of a system. The fact that a famous singer gasping for breath on a hospital bed, her body gaunt and withered from severe illness, was handcuffed to the bed frame by police on charges of possessing banned substances is an ultimate insult to human dignity. Her dull skin and frail figure at that time were not the embodiment of a fallen person, but the most authentic picture of a soul that had been rejected and drained to the very end by this society. At our Memory Vault, we do not view Billie Holiday's final days with judgment. We look at that gardenia flower with empathy and respect. She was trampled by harsh laws, denied the right to be treated humanely. The fading on her face is the strongest indictment against the lack of compassion in the entertainment world. No matter how poorly the world treated her, Lady Day's sobbing, sad voice will forever be an indestructible diamond, reminding humanity of the intense vitality of a woman who sang with her very own wounds. Nina Simone. Nina Simone was not just a singer, she was a musical phenomenon, a classical piano prodigy, and one of the strongest, most direct voices of the American civil rights movement. With a deep, raspy voice carrying the weight of an entire era, she turned songs like Feeling Good or Mississippi, Goddamn into anthems of freedom and pride. Unlike the softness of contemporary female singers, Nina possessed a beauty of majesty, a sharp gaze, and the aura of a leader. However, carrying too great a mission on her shoulders caused her inner self to gradually become unstable. Her departure during her years living in exile in France closed a highly glorious life chapter, but also contained far too much loneliness. Analyzing deep into Nina Simone's journey, we can truly understand the cause leading to the depletion of her aura in her twilight years. Her fading did not originate from indulgent lifestyles, but came from the erosion of bipolar disorder that was not diagnosed in time. Her anger at social injustices, coupled with uncontrollable emotional outbursts, caused her to gradually distance herself from family, friends, and the entertainment industry. Her final years, battling breast cancer in the French countryside, her frail body, thinning hair, and slow steps are the image of a female general who had depleted her vitality after decades of relentlessly fighting for what was right. We honor Nina Simone at our Memory Vault not only for her outstanding talent, but for her rare courage. It is easy to understand that she lost the authoritative, strong look of her youth to dawn weariness in her final days. A person carrying an overly large fire inside will often incinerate themselves. Her quiet departure abroad was when the world finally allowed that stormy soul to rest. Nina Simone may have left in a fragile form, but her legacy of courage and the desire for equality will always be a lighthouse guiding countless generations. Etta James. Whenever the intro notes of the song "At Last" ring out, the whole world seems to immerse itself in absolute romance through the growling, wild, yet highly powerful voice of Etta James. She was the model of an untamable R&B queen, bright blonde hair, voluptuous, seductive beauty, and a strong personality not afraid of anyone. Etta sang as if she were pouring her entire guts out, bringing a music that was straightforward, authentic, and blazing. However, behind that world-defying confidence, her real life was an uncompromising battle with the demons in her own soul. Her final years at the hospital are a highly heartbreaking picture of the devastation of time and illness. Medical and psychological perspectives show that Etta James's frailty was not the result of a single day. It was the consequence of a decades-long process, struggling with addiction weight issues, major surgeries, and finally the attack of leukemia and dementia. The image of Etta lying on a hospital bed, her once voluptuous figure now severely reduced, her sharp, haughty gaze replaced by the lifelessness of the memory loss disease, made those who loved her unable to hold back their tears. Illness cruelly stripped away not only vitality, but also the glorious memories of an artist's lifetime. Looking back at Etta James's journey, our memory vault perceives an extraordinary vitality. She had to fight the ghosts of the past, from a childhood lacking love to rise to become an icon. The fact that her body withered away in her final days is merely proof that she fought until the very last drop of blood. Although dementia may have blurred her memory, the world will never forget Etta James. She lived a stormy, brilliant, and highly proud life. Her departure is the end of physical pains, leaving humanity an eternal singing voice about love and healing. Barry White. Barry White, the man dubbed the Walrus of Love, redefined the entire concept of romance in the 70s. Possessing a massive physique and a warm, deep bass voice, resonating like velvet, Barry captivated millions of hearts through immortal love songs like "Can't Get Enough of Your Love, Babe." On stage, he always appeared with an elegant demeanor, conducting an entire giant symphony orchestra, exuding the aura of an authoritative yet incredibly warm gentleman. However, behind the massive body that brought a sense of solidity, Barry's health was a candle flickering in the wind, gradually being drained by a relentless lifestyle. The severe physical decline of Barry White in his final years is a heartbreaking consequence of chronic diseases ravaging from the inside. Maintaining an exhausting touring schedule for many decades, combined with high blood pressure and obesity issues, led to end-stage kidney failure. Having to rely on a dialysis machine and then suffering a severe stroke, the once robust body of the giant became swollen, debilitated, and completely lost control. The eyes that were once highly flirtatious and romantic on stage now only held the fatigue of a sick person who no longer had enough strength to fight. At our Memory Vault, we view the departure of Barry White at the age of 58 with boundless regret. His physical fading before closing his eyes does not dim the massive legacy he left behind. It is proof showing that even the most solid musical monuments are only flesh and blood human beings vulnerable to the cruel rules of life and death of nature. Barry White dedicated his entire life to singing about love, to connecting kindred hearts, even though his own heart and body could not accompany him to the end of the road. Sam Cooke. Sam Cooke is engraved in music history with the title King of Soul. Possessing an elegant look, a charming smile, and a sweet voice, with the power to move people's hearts, Sam was the symbol of success and intellect. Through great musical works like A Change Is Gonna Come, he not only sang but also lit the torch of hope for the American civil rights movement. He was one of the rare black artists of that time to establish his own record label and hold his music copyrights. However, that very brave pioneering placed a massive burden on his shoulders, draining his vitality day by day before tragedy struck in 1964. From an analytical perspective, the frailty and weariness clearly visible on Sam Cooke's face in his final months was the consequence of an unequal battle. Having to continuously confront the forces of a racially segregated music industry, coupled with the pressure to protect his family and maintain the image of a spiritual leader, pushed him into a state of chronic stress. An exhausting work schedule and prolonged insomnia took away the radiance of his 33rd year. The early wrinkles on his forehead and anxious eyes were proof of a soul having to shoulder far too many historical missions. On our channel, the sudden departure of Sam Cooke leaves an infinite sorrow, even though his final days were besieged by ultimate fatigue and an unjust, undeserved end. The legacy he left behind remains an invincible monument. When older audiences look back at the image of Sam Cooke, they not only see a singer, but see a hero who bravely used his life and youth to pave the way for future generations of artists. His physical wear and tear is an invisible medal of courage. Otis Redding. Otis Redding carried within him a fiery heart and a signature raspy voice capable of squeezing every emotion out of the listener. He was the soul of the Stax Records label, someone who could make even the most demanding audiences shed tears. However, if one only looks at the photos in the final stage of his life, rarely would anyone believe that Otis Redding at that time had just turned 26. An austere face, eyes holding far too many thoughts, and a physique bearing the traits of a middle-aged man most authentically reflected the harshness of a work environment with no room for rest. The physical exhaustion of Otis Redding originated from the touring system known as the Chitlin Circuit. Grueling trips on cramped buses, performing every night without stopping to earn money to support his family and band. The pressure to continuously create the lack of sleep and nutrition wore down the immune system and vitality of a young man. The classic song Sitting on the Dock of the Bay, recorded just days before the fateful flight, is not only a masterpiece, but also the sighing yearn for rest of a body that had been squeezed dry. We tell the story of Otis Redding to honor the silent sacrifice of a natural talent. His having to bear an older, tired appearance beyond his years was not a deterioration, but the price of dedication and boundless love for his family and music. His life stopped on the icy lake surface at the age of 26, but he lived and contributed with the effort of many lifetimes combined. Otis Redding will forever be a philosopher of the soul genre who sang with every drop of sweat and the most arduous tears. Rick James. Rick James was an explosive phenomenon of the 80s funk and R&B music scene. With the super hit Super Freak, he created a musical revolution, breaking all barriers of standards and bringing a wild, rebellious energy never seen before. Rick's style was a combination of sparkling sequin outfits, signature braided hair, and an attitude defying the whole world. He lived exactly up to the title Super Freak, turning his life into a party that never ended. However, when the lights of the party nights went out, Rick James fell into a deep abyss of loneliness and self-destruction, causing his appearance and career to slide into the darkness. Going deep into analysis, the frailty of Rick James is an epic picture of the price of abusing stimulants to maintain the illusion of fame. When the pressure to continuously create billion-dollar hits weighed heavily, coupled with unresolved psychological traumas, Rick turned to drugs as a temporary release medicine. But chemicals cruelly demanded their debt. From a brilliant star, his body was heavily devastated by a series of medical issues, including heart failure and stroke. In his final years, the once toned, agile figure was replaced by frailty and premature aging. The man who once rocked every major stage in America had to live his final days in the quiet stillness of an apartment, shunning the eyes of the public. We retell the story of Rick James not to judge, but to bring a profound wake-up call. The change that made the audience unable to recognize him is exactly the cruel trace that the vanity of showbiz left on an outstanding talent. Rick James used his music to make the world dance, but tied himself in the chains of falling from grace. Even though he departed in silence, the explosive funk rhythms he created will forever be an indispensable part of pop culture heritage. Curtis Mayfield? Unlike stars sliding into temptation, the tragedy of Curtis Mayfield carries a completely different color, the ultimate cruelty of fate. As the soul of the Chicago soul genre, Curtis brought a soaring, gentle falsetto voice that contained profound and weighty social messages. Through masterpieces like People Get Ready or the soundtrack Superfly, he empowered millions of black people in the fight for equality. He was an exemplary artist, a poet always standing on the side of the light. However, in August 1990, a horrific accident on stage when a lighting scaffold collapsed permanently changed his life, taking away the mobility of a genius. Paralyzed in all four limbs, from the neck down, Curtis Mayfield went from a vibrant performing artist to a disabled person completely dependent on the care of others. His physical depletion in the final decade of his life was inevitable. Complications from diabetes made his health even worse, having to amputate part of a leg and face continuous pain. The face that once exuded wisdom and peace was now etched with the marks of endurance. His body gradually withered on the hospital bed, creating a highly heartbreaking image for those who once witnessed him standing proudly on major stages. However, at our Memory Vault, we honor Curtis Mayfield as the greatest warrior. His physical body might be imprisoned and withered, but his soul never submitted. With extraordinary willpower, he continued to compose and record his final album while lying flat on his back, painfully typing each word to control his vocal cords. The deterioration in Curtis's appearance was not a sign of the end, but the background highlighting the most brilliant light of human willpower. He taught us that even when the body is shattered, a steadfast soul can still raise the most beautiful epics for life. Ike Turner. Ike Turner is one of the most complex and controversial figures in American music history. No one can deny his foundational role, a true architect who laid the first bricks for modern rock and roll and R&B. He was an outstanding guitarist, a talented producer who discovered and polished the rough diamond Tina Turner into a global icon. In his peak years, Ike exuded power, the sharpness of a boss, always holding control of everything in his hands. But the boundary between a genius and a tyrant is sometimes too fragile. The abuse of power, domestic violence, and getting bogged down in stimulants single-handedly smashed the empire he had painstakingly built. The final years of Ike Turner's life are a gloomy picture of isolation and fading. When the dark, hidden corners in his marriage were exposed, he was turned away by the entertainment world and gradually sank into oblivion. No longer having the aura, no longer having the harmonious performing partner, Ike slid into serious medical issues. Emphysema due to years of smoking and cardiovascular complications choked his breathing. The image of a once powerful boss replaced by a gaunt, frail old man, sometimes appearing with a frail, tired exterior, is the result of having to live with the ghosts of the past and public judgment. The story of Ike Turner on the Our Memory Vault channel is a costly lesson about karma and self-respect. Outstanding talent can take you to the peak of fame, but how you treat those around you determines how you will be remembered when you leave. Ike passed away in silence at his home, closing a life full of contradictions. His faded appearance in his final days is a mirror, reflecting the emptiness of a soul that lost true love, a sad price paid for letting the dark part within oneself overshadow the light of art. Wilson Pickett. Wilson Pickett was a true tornado of the 60s music scene. With the nickname Wicked Pickett, Fierce Pickett, he possessed explosive wild energy and a singing voice that could shake any space. Super hits like In the Midnight Hour or Mustang Sally are proof of a masculine, strong, and vibrant aura. He always burned himself out on stage like a warrior who never backed down. However, when the wheel of the era turned, the appearance of disco and new electronic music genres pushed back the golden era of traditional soul. Along with that downturn, Wilson Pickett's health and spirit also began to enter highly harsh days of fading. Looking at it profoundly, the physical decline of Wilson Pickett in his final years was the consequence of an incredibly cruel identity crisis. Feeling left behind by the times dealt a heavy blow to the pride of a monument. The efforts to seek oblivion through alcohol and an uncontrolled lifestyle severely ravaged his cardiovascular system. Chronic heart failure turned a once incredibly muscular, agile body into one that was swollen, slow, and weak. His image in his final years is a heartbreaking contrast to the fiery energy of his golden age. On our channel, the story of Wilson Pickett brings deep empathy for artists at the final stage of their careers. His withering teaches us a lesson about ultimate loneliness when the aura leaves. However, even though the beating of his heart weakened due to severe illness, the pounding, intense rhythms he left behind in music will never be erased. He lived fully like the brightest burning torch and left warmth for many future generations. Richard Roundtree. Closing this list is a legend, not belonging to the music field, but a great monument of American cinema, Richard Roundtree. Through the classic role of Detective John Shaft, Richard completely redefined the image of the black man on the silver screen, elegant, powerful, never bowing his head, and incredibly seductive. He was the symbol of strength and pride. In contrast to artists ravaged by falling from grace, the change in Richard's appearance in his final days was the result of a decades-long life and death battle with the most cruel terminal illnesses. Few know that behind that dashing exterior, Richard Roundtree once had to face a rare disease, male breast cancer. With astonishing resilience, he not only overcame it, but also bravely stood up to use his voice to raise awareness for the community. However, the most cruel trial hit at the age of 81 when he was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. Harsh treatment sessions eroded the muscular, robust figure of the hero Shaft. His body thinned rapidly, his face deeply etched with the austere traits of pain. But the most miraculous thing is right until his very last breath, his steadfast gaze and poised demeanor never changed. The story of Richard Roundtree is an epic about human dignity. Physical fading did not diminish his greatness. On the contrary, it further highlighted the steely spirit of a true warrior. He taught us that illness can strip away the strength of muscles, but can never strike down self-respect and pride. The legacy of Richard Roundtree will forever remain a lighthouse of strength, perfectly closing the journey, looking back at legends who lived incredibly brilliant and meaningful lives. Ladies and gentlemen, the 19 stories that have closed have reminded us of the impermanence of life. Most importantly, let us cherish the present and the immortal artistic legacies they left behind. We wish you always have peaceful, joyful moments with your family. Do not forget to hit like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell to accompany us. Goodbye, and see you again.